My lords, a week or two ago I asked the community, what is your hottest Stellaris take? I gave you some examples. Should Megastructure Cap be removed? Should we be able to toggle habitats on or off? Should we delete empire size? I asked that you comment your hottest take and like the ones you agree with. Well, today I'm going to go through your comments and see the hottest takes from the community. But first, let's address the poll. I'd like to thank all 6,300 of the people who voted and the 254 commenters, as well as everyone who liked the various comments. I hope you enjoyed the video. Clearly, looking at the poll, Megastructure Cap is by far the most popular, with 51% of the vote. I think that's an interesting thing to explore, and I can see it from a couple of different perspectives. Clearly, Megastructure Cap is there for a reason. It's there to limit the so-called power that megastructures provide. However, I think in the current state, megastructures are just simply not powerful enough, or certainly the resource-producing ones aren't. Is a Dyson sphere producing 4,000 energy that exciting when you can have a planet producing a similar amount? I would suggest no. However, I do think you really could start breaking the game if you could build as many megastructures as you liked, particularly things like mega shipyards, science nexus, potentially the Sentry Array as well since it gives base level intel, and also things like the Interstellar Assembly or the Strategic Coordination Bay. Per se, I wouldn't actually be against there being no limit for Dyson swarms and matter decompressors, since all they do is produce basic resource, and in reality it's not that much anymore. But I think things like the Sentry Array and the Strategic Coordination Center probably should be capped, because otherwise the bonuses that they get could just snowball out of control. Similarly for the Interstellar Assembly, it gives a massive bonus to diplomatic weight. If you were to combine that with the power of friendship from the upcoming Defender of the Galaxy changes with nomads, well, that could certainly break the game. So despite it being a hot take, I do think Megastructure Cap is probably a good thing to keep. Remember as well, it's build cap, not own cap. So you do get the opportunity to go and steal other people's megastructures and gain the power that comes with it. A toggle for habitats is next to discuss, on or off. Reading through the comments, as we will shortly, I found habitats to be a very polarizing subject indeed. It is remarkable how many people get irritated by habitats, and myself included. Some of this is based on legacy opinions of how they used to work, where you could build lots of habitats in one system, but it is absolutely a frustration, not just from me, but from the community as well, that when you have to go to war with an empire that has 20 habitats as well as 20 planets, it's a slog, and it's irritating. Although that only received 23% of the vote, there were some very vocal comments about it. And finally, delete empire size. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of empire size. I believe empire size is only in place to limit expansion and try and prevent early snowballing. I don't subscribe to this idea that, oh, a really large empire is impossible to manage. Well, okay, why can't we build more administrators and have them manage our larger empires, as I believe we used to be able to do? I think empire size, particularly the fact that it limits your research capability, is a bad mechanic, and I would absolutely change it. I think empire size should be changed to allow me to fight against it with the use of administrators, for example. And if that means I have to dedicate 1 in every 7 worlds to administrators, fine. At least I have the opportunity to do it. But in any case, let's move on, because the comments discuss all 3 of these topics individually and of course bring up some of their own. The top commenter on this poll is Nolan Rooney 17, and they have a wonderfully beautiful profile picture, so thank you for sharing that. Nolan Rooney says, personally, I would prefer that instead of a hard mega cap for megastructures, it should have a shared cap similar to naval. It would make a lot of sense for an empire to build a second Dyson sphere because they have no black holes from matter decompressor, rather than arbitrarily deciding that one of each is the limit. Nolan, I think that's very reasonable indeed, particularly with the resource generating megastructures, although I do think it would be odd for an empire to build, say, 2 interstellar assemblies. I guess From a lore perspective, there just wouldn't really be a reason to do that, and I think mechanically, if you could, they would quickly snowball out of control. So I agree with you, but maybe limit that only to the resource generating megastructures. The responses say, Solomon Bush, I also think federations should share a slightly boosted megastructure cap that gives reduced bonuses to all of them. That's a very interesting perspective. I mean, there could be a sort of federation style assembly, a bit like the interstellar assembly. Should the capacity scale with empire size? Well, that is very interesting indeed. I actually think there could be a world in which the resource-focused megastructures specifically do scale with empire size, or perhaps number of systems. I'm not quite sure what you would use for that, but I also think that the Deep Space Citadel upcoming cap, which will scale with starbase size, also will work off system size as well, so it somewhat makes sense. I think that that is an interesting avenue to explore. Thank you very much, Nolan Bruni, and the 312 people that liked that comment. Huru3638, toggle habitats solely so I can stop the AI from building 30 of them. 125 likes. Kuru, I am not surprised that that is a highly liked comment. I think many people agree with you. Stellaris certainly has some mechanics that are frustrating to deal with, and I think the way that war works, particularly when you have to take every single system or every single planet, and then the AI builds another 30 habitats, it's frustrating to deal with. So I can completely understand why that has so many likes. What do the replies say? Morgan Starworks, invading them gets so annoying. I completely agree. Especially this response here is spot on. They've either got no troops because they've got no population on them, or they built it into a fortress with 2,000. Joe says they miss having many per system. It felt cool to have a centralized system of commerce. Didn't like how every empire could have 10 planets and 6 to 8 habitats. Would rather have had the option to disable them for non-void-born empires. That is a really interesting last statement. Would rather have the option to disable them for non-void-born empires. There is certainly a world in which an empire would like the option to have habitats and planets. Entirely reasonable. I think the dislike here is purely from a quality of life perspective when you have to go through, let's say, 30 systems and 15 of them have habitats and 5 of them have planets, and it just becomes a real slog compared to if they just had the 5 planets. Frankly, I'm not really sure how the developers could deal with this other than creating a toggle for literally habitats on or off. Of course, it would break some empires as well. I will tell you that there is a limit per empire per habitat, which is based on map size. I'll try and put that up on screen for you now, but essentially, depending on the size of the map, limits the number of habitats AI can build. So they have tried to get that in place, but of course it's quite a difficult thing for them to balance, I think. Moving on to Nevet, who also supports the habitat ban. Lots of people, so does Yusu Fander. Both of these people support the habitat ban. Nevet says they're super neat, but the end game, I always end up renaming my Colossus to the habitat remover. I might give that a cheeky heart. I agree. That's a funny one. Specifically with habitats, while we're talking about it, I always depopulate habitats. I don't want to deal with them in terms of building them up, so I resettle all the population off the hab onto a planet. That in itself is very annoying because you need 200 influence to do it. So if you conquer an AI and it has 6 habitats, well, that's 1200 influence, sir. And that's obviously takes time to build up. It's a pain. Similarly with the next comment from Yusu, toggle habitat off. They're fun to play with, but the AI don't know what they're doing. Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree. Azhey4332, non-genocidal Gestalt empires should be allowed to recruit legendary paragons, and I think their leaders should be allowed to get destiny traits. This is an interesting hot take, and we have some replies to this one. Friendly Archpriest, but can't you do that already? I remember playing as the machine intelligence that worshipped the Eater of Worlds and recruiting his paragon. So I've pointed out that the Eater of Worlds paragon isn't legendary. In this comment, they're referring to Azarin, Sharpbeak, Hades, and so on and so forth. And I do think the statement has merit. Why can't Gestalts access legendary paragons when they can access some of the other paragons? I'm not too sure. That's one of the decisions that I'm not sure makes that much sense. I'm trying to think of a reason, and I can't really. I guess in terms of how you engage with some of them, maybe. But Azarin, for example, why wouldn't she engage with the Gestalt consciousness? I don't know. I don't know. I've always thought that Gestalts are sort of designed in a way for easy gameplay or simplistic gameplay, because lots of things available to regular empires are actually cut out of Gestalts, this being a perfect example. But other than them being deliberately limited from legendary ones, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Maybe that's a question for the developers. Ziggy the Assassin, Colossi and Ecumenopolis and their Gestalt equivalents should not be locked behind Ascension perks. Both feel like obvious development milestones for late game civilizations rather than specific ambitions for your civilization specialize in. ECUs are a must pick for any serious game, which removes the choice of an Ascension perk slot. Colossus are cool but more of a novelty than a power boost, so it feels like an opportunity cost to pick them. Everyone having a Colossus would also make the endgame more fun and dramatic. They should just be late game techs. I'll read the replies in a minute. I don't necessarily agree with this though. Colossus should be locked behind Ascension perk. Yes, I think Colossus and the power that a Colossus represents, it probably should be locked behind an Ascension perk. I also think that's not going to change because it's tied to the Apocalypse DLC. And I imagine when these DLCs are set up, Ascension perks are a selling point, and that's why it goes together. I've always thought that that's why Detoxify is an Ascension perk and not a technology, because it's tied to a DLC. But in any case, what about ECUs? So I actually think that ECUs should remain an Ascension perk, but they should be combined with the World Shaper Ascension perk and maybe the Hydrocentric Ascension perk, maybe the Detoxify Ascension perk. Just mush them all together, because then you have this sort of gigantic ambition to become a World Shaper rather than all these separate ones. Let's see what the replies say. The original Kyber Wolf says to add there should be planetary defenses to counter Colossi, either shield districts to stall. Well, I guess we do have shields, but not to reduce a Colossus. It just stops some of the damage from bombardment. Rings should be tied to planet defense and make it harder to crack the planet. Well, they sort of already are, because you can put guns on them and so on and so forth. Yeah, I'm not sure about this one. I think it's probably a reasonably popular opinion, but I don't necessarily agree with it. I do definitely subscribe to the hard choices make good choices kind of argument, but I definitely think the ECU Ascension perk could be combined with some of the other ones to make it better. And also, I don't know how many of you are taking Hydrocentric and World Shaper and so on and so forth, but maybe it means that you have access to those when you wouldn't previously, and maybe it makes it easier for them to balance, because by taking that Ascension perk you can build all of them. You can make your resource producing worlds Gaia worlds, and you can make your alloy worlds ECUs, and everyone's happy. Aquilabird. Option to force all Leviathans and or precursors to spawn. Interesting, I'm not sure that's a hot take. So all Leviathans spawning, I'm torn about that one. I think it partly depends on the map size you play on and how many games you play. Would I want every single Leviathan to spawn every single game? I don't know. I think it's quite nice sometimes to not be given everything at once. I guess if it's an option, then it's just a button you can press yes or no. And I personally would probably leave it off. So yeah, I don't really think there'd be a problem with that per se. Precursors to spawn is a really interesting one. I think the precursor system should be reworked for several reasons. I think AI should be allowed to access precursors, which they currently don't. And I think every single precursor should spawn in the galaxy, but because AI can access them, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to get every single one. And it also means that, particularly on larger galaxies, you may not get any at all, or maybe you can only do the first couple of dig sites, or however it may be. That would be my preference. I think this would do a number of things. I think it would make it more interesting, because your empire could learn about all the different precursors, potentially, in the same game, which is a good thing in my opinion. And I also think it would try and prevent this idea that players lock on to one specific precursor for their playthrough. A fantastic example, the community thinks that the Cybrex is the best precursor ever, and I'm here to tell you, it's just not. The Cybrex is the biggest noob trap in the entire game. This isn't the video for me to talk about that. Some of you will have balked at that statement and be like, oh, he's crazy, the Cybrex are amazing, you get mega engineering and a ring world, and okay, whatever. Others will get behind that statement and agree. It seems that's probably the hottest take of this entire video. In any case, I'm not a fan that you can limit your precursors down. I would much rather have the opportunity for all of them to spawn, and then the AI can sort of fight you for them and you get what you get. And maybe there's a system where you can trade precursor insights with an AI empire. If you've learnt about the Irasians and they've learnt about the Yup, or let's say you're on 3 out of 6 insights, you could trade insights with them to try and find the homeworld, or however that may be. That could be a really interesting system. I expect there to be comments about the Cybrex not being very good, but we'll move on. Maybe I need an entire video to justify that. Do you know what? I'll give you a 30-second justification now, so we don't have to deal with it in the comments too much. Justification 1. The relic is really not very good. Being able to change 1,000 minerals into 1,000 alloys, who cares? You can do it once every 10 years and it goes up. I think it caps at 20k, or maybe it's 5k. I forget. Who cares? That's such a nothing relic. Point 2. The ring world is no longer habitable when you find it. You have to rebuild it. I also think ring worlds are overrated because you're never going to be able to develop the population enough to fill it up in a normal game, particularly when you won't find it for 50 years or whatever it might be. Mega engineering is wonderful, but largely overrated when you get it in 100 years anyway. Those are sort of my take-home points about the Cybrex. It's all fine, but it's very average. Oh, and Cybrex Warforms. Cybrex Warforms are marvelous, but they take so long to build. That's your biggest takeaway there. And armies generally aren't really that important in the game. As cool as the Cybrex Warforms are, they're just not very important. I would much, much rather have something like the Adakaria relic, which gives you ship upkeep discounts, for example, because ship upkeep discounts are way more valuable than a button you can press that gives you, 4 battleships worth of alloys. I could rant about that for a while. Demon Ling, instead of removing megastructures, I would prefer to have it go up by empire size. We've covered that already. Empire size could go away. Demon, I agree with you, and I think based on what we've read so far, the community agrees with you, and you got 102 likes. Robert Moore, definitely think AI having access to habitats makes the game very annoying for late game wars. The invasion system is not robust to feel engaging enough like it's worth spending hours on end invading habitats in every single system. We've sort of already covered this already, Robert. I agree. I think the community generally agrees as well. Claire, I hate empire size with a passion, but without it, wide empires would be able to outscale tool empires in tech, as the only restricting factors would be population and resource, which the wide empire would have more of. Yeah, as it should be. As it should be. The empire with the 50 planets should be able to crush the empire with the 3 planets. Instead, remove the megastructure cap, let tool empires tech rush, and invest their tech and resources into things that don't require population to run. I mean, they can sort of already do that. Empires or players can choose to invest in automation if they so wish. I don't really subscribe to this tool empires should magically be better at tech than wide empires for reasons. I don't buy it at all. Yeah, it's not for me. What did the reply say to this one? It needs refinement. Empires were penalized for having high growth or build speed, necessitating more planets. This is where the district system was meant to help, but even that in totality puts you down. Yeah, because you get empire size from districts. Add multiple copies of the same Leviathan to the galaxy. Hot take, Bert, and I disagree. Why would having 2 scavenger bots make it more special? It wouldn't. So no, I don't think that's a good idea. I think the answer to this is have more Leviathans or have more space fauna in the galaxy. I think that would be a good thing to do, but I don't think having multiple copies of the same thing would be a good thing. Apparently the comments disagree with me. That would honestly work in lore for most of them. That would be nice if they wrote some flavor text to differentiate the copies. Okay, actually these are fair. So more ether drakes and void spawns, I agree, that would be fine. Automated dreadnoughts, I agree, that would be fine. I don't know about the Stellarite Devourer and the Scrapbot or the Horror. Yeah, I don't think the Devourer, Scrapbot or the Horror would be good, but do you know what, on reflection, we could have a couple of automated dreadnoughts. We could even have a couple in the same system. That would be really cool. That would actually make for a proper system to fight. Maybe a couple more Wraiths, sure. A couple more Void Spawns. Brilliant. Sounds good. Nick Nitro wants a vassal cap that can be increased with Ascension perks. Nick, that's an interesting take because there isn't a vassal cap. Oh, unless you're asking for a vassal cap. But why would... I don't really know why you'd have a vassal cap. Vassals are in an interesting state because vassals, despite popular opinion, will rebel if you treat them poorly and have no fleet. This has happened to me before when I've been running an authoritarian style government. I've vassalized, let's say, 10 empires, but have an overwhelmingly powerful fleet. The contingency spawn, delete my fleet. As soon as I lose the fleet, every single one of my vassals rebels, declares war on me. During the contingency crisis, everyone dies. It was glorious, but they do already do that. I don't necessarily think that we need an additional Ascension perk to increase vassal cap. I don't think that would be a good thing for the game. KR says, I'm pretty sure the Great Khan is broken with fleet updates. My galaxy is nowhere near 50k by the time he arrives. I've seen no issue with the Great Khan. 50k by 2300, assuming default settings. It's very difficult for me to comment on those things. I think that's fine, personally. ISO meme, agreed the Great Khan spawned on my border. I had no choice but to immediately surrender. My total fleet strength and starbase defenses would have slowed the horde down. It's really difficult for me to comment on these things sometimes because they don't necessarily always feel like problems to me, but maybe they are. It's difficult to know what difficulty and crisis strength. For example, if you have it set on 25x and the Khan spawns at 2300, well, yeah, you're probably going to be in trouble. If it's, 2300 on 1x, you should be okay. Rogue was banned. It would be cool if they changed how Colossus damages relations dynamically. Like a terraforming Colossus shouldn't cause as much as a relations hit as well crackers or sweepers. Well, Rogue, that is actually the case. I covered it when I ranked all of the different Colossus super weapons. They do have different malices depending on exactly which one it is that you're using. So that is already a thing. Although they go on to say, I don't understand why I'm taking galactic heat from drowning a couple of genocidal hive mind pops from the game. I do somewhat agree with you on that one. I think that maybe there should be a penalty because you are still committing genocide yourself, I guess, but maybe the penalty should be way, way reduced. I also think, and without using any real world examples, if we had, let's pretend, for example, we were being invaded by an alien race of superbugs, the bugs from Helldivers. Let's say they all landed in Canada. All these superbugs landed in Canada, and America decided, okay, well, we're going to bomb the crap out of Canada. We're just going to nuke Canada and kill all the alien bugs. I suspect the rest of the world, while very thankful that America has nuked all the bugs, would also be a little bit like, did you need to use the nuclear bombs on Canada, America? I'm not sure, we're still friends. I do think that there would be some nuance in that, so I do understand why the Galcom is not overjoyed that to kill the genocidals, you've blown up some worlds. I think there's some nuance in there. Sorry, Canada, I apologize for using you as an example. You're such lovely people. Cyrus, I would love a more detailed galaxy setting, like being able to more easily specify which exact empires will spawn, which Leviathan's unique systems and precursors would spawn. My dream would be adding a canon galaxy. This is a version of the Milky Way and a few real stars roughly in the right place. I think Stellaris is missing characters, with certain preset empires having a relatively predictable, lovable hate behavior. Interesting. If you know that the Cybrex will spawn towards the center of the galaxy, that might drive you to expand in that direction. I agree with some of your points. I don't agree with all of your points. I don't think knowing where the Cybrex is going to spawn is a good thing. I think that you should embrace the mystery and embrace the RNG. I do think that a more stable galactic history would be a good thing for the game. I think having a clearer story about how the galaxy started, when the Zeroni spawned, having a clearer timeline, for example. I know that I've worked on the timelines before. But a fair amount of speculation has to be used to fill in some of the gaps between what happened between the First League and the Arassians, for example. Millions of years passed and we don't really know what happened. So I agree in terms of a sort of broader timeline being a little bit better set in stone would be a good thing. And I actually think that by having all of the precursors spawn in the same galaxy would help that. I don't agree with a map with more landmarks would drive gameplay. However, given the scenario system that they're bringing out at the end of the year, maybe that's the sort of thing that you could set up if you so wished. Victor, honestly, the last two could be made into game settings, like if you want to paint the map, then toggle empire size off, or want or don't want habitats. Meanwhile, I think megastructures in their current state should not have a cap. They are simply outclassed in almost every way by a well-developed planet. Yeah, so Victor, we've sort of covered all of those points already, haven't we? I maintain that I think the resource ones perhaps shouldn't have a cap, but some of the other ones should, and we've discussed the other things. Jan Orbit, you should have the ability to block or weaken jump drives within your empire. Jan, I think that is a really good idea. I actually think a module that we could attach specifically to a deep space citadel to sort of have an aura that prevents jump drive from working either in system or maybe in a small circle, like a blocker would be fantastic. On that, I also think that we should have some sort of nebula generator or cloaking generator mechanic that we can add to a starbase so that even empires with brilliant intel can't look into those systems. They just have to send in a ship. I think that would be really, really cool to have a deep space citadel choke point that you add a jump drive blocker to, and then you add some sort of cloaking tech to, so you just can't see what's in the system. They have to send ships in ready for your guns to annihilate them. I think that'd be really cool. And the comment, Ziggy and Free Vulture agree with Jan. I think that's a really good take. Ryan, I miss the old empire size. You could increase it with jobs. I loved making a planet the space DMV. Ryan, I tend to agree with you. I do think that if empire size is a thing, then why can't we just hire more administrators to fix it? It doesn't quite vibe with me. The fact that we have instant communication across the entire galaxy, we have replicators that can just magic food from thin air, we can figure out administration and empire size. Tech should not suffer because you have lots of planets. Gay Grandpa, the only mod I use is to disable habitats. Good for you. Ismail, I want large galaxies where you can type in whatever number you like. Okay, 3,000 star galaxies sound awful. It sounds like you want to set your computer on fire. But for what it's worth, I agree with the free text options. For example, endgame date. Let us just type in a number. Why do we have to use the slider? Just let us type. Celestial Caesar, terraforming was cooler when terraforming gases and liquids were a hard requirement. Celestial, that was before my time, sadly, so I can't really comment on that. Seagull, let me scrap habitats. I don't like them and just crack them. Do you know what? Scrapping habitats is a really good take. Really good take. I wonder if we can disassemble habitats, like we can disassemble starbases and DSCs. I've never tried. I think that's a really good take. You should be able to disassemble them and you should get alloys in return. Frank agrees with bringing back admin cap centers to manage empire size. Alexi, I have yet to encounter an issue that can't be solved with more toggles. Alexi likes a toggle. Battle sheep, devouring swarms should be able to have diplomacy with machine empires because if not food, then friends. Well, yeah, but they eat machine empires as well. It's just a different flavor. They eat everything. I was trying to think of an example, but I can't. In any case, devouring swarms eat everything. Think of a Tyranid swarm. It eats the entire planet. It doesn't care what it's made of. Dan Loftus, warfare technology that allows weaponized and targeted viruses and or nanites. I don't think this is necessarily a hot take. It's something that's been raised before. I think the issue of using a virus in a game like Stellaris, which is heavily focused on warfare, is how is that implemented? And I do think that's really important because it needs to be entertaining and enjoyable to deal with. And if it's just a situation which is, okay, we pick, option A, B, or C, and we just leave it and it takes 25% of our unity, well, that's not going to be very fun. So it is, I would support viruses and bioweapons and so on and so forth, but I do think you have to be really careful with how you implement them to make sure it's interesting and entertaining. Dragon Saint, if you want my spiciest take, one that the vast majority of players would not agree with me on, a research tree would be better than the random card rolling system. This is actually a really popular take. Yeah, lots of people agree with that. I'm not surprised. I personally quite like the randomized approach to technology. In a game like Stellaris, why would Empire A necessarily follow the same research as Empire B? I appreciate that it's kind of backwards because it is on a tree, but the cards are randomized. Maybe what you could have, and I don't know if this would break it, you could have the opportunity to roll any tech in the game at any time in the game, but the percentage chance that you would roll that tech diminishes the more powerful the tech is, the higher on, sort of higher up the tree is, if you like. So in theory, day one, you could roll jump drives. But of course, if you did roll jump drives, it would take you 50 years to research that technology. I don't know if that would work. It probably wouldn't. I quite like the randomness, although I do think it's probably quite difficult for new players to get their head around. Mario Fan Fish. I want a toggle to turn the spawns for genocidal and Gestalt empires on or off. They add spice to the galaxy, but they're annoying and aren't interesting to interact with. Interesting. Do we need a toggle for that? I don't know. That's not something that bothers me, but I can understand why that would be irritating. We have another comment from Alexi. It would be genuine insanity to uncap megastructures as they are currently implemented. Megastructures are defined very specifically around single build, and people effectively demonstrate what it's like when you steal an abundance of megas from the AI to create some really heinous scaling. Hot take for a reason. Yeah, I agree, as we've covered already in this video. I agree, I think that's a reasonable take. Not for all of them, but for some of them for sure. And the final hot take of the day is from PyYo744. Stellaris leans way too far into space fantasy for me to find the core setting enjoyable. If a game like Stellaris mechanically and tone-wise, but without the stuff like the Shroud psionics and space fauna, and with far less humanoid aliens, I'd probably drop Stellaris and pick up the other game in a heartbeat. Interesting comment. Space fantasy. I don't think psionics is too wild, honestly. I really don't think psionics is too crazy. And I certainly don't think space fauna is crazy either. There are certainly some things in the game that I guess are more pushing on the fantasy side. But space is vast and full of wonders. So maybe that is a hot take. My lords, thank you so much for watching. And thank you to everyone who commented and got involved in this poll. Let me know if you enjoy these kind of videos and we'll do more in the future. Thank you.